Guys, my battery died while I was reading, but basically what George and Lenny are talking about right now is this place that they want to save up money and buy. There's a couple things that are appealing to George and Lenny about buying this place. Okay, first of all, they wouldn't have to travel around anymore, and they wouldn't have anyone to be their boss. And that's really appealing to them. George was just saying, like, if one of our friends comes, we could just say, hey, stay the night, and they would. He's talking about how, let's see, something was going to get the rabbits, and Lenny said, you just let them try to get those rabbits. I'll hit them with a stick. And that's right where my computer died. Okay. I think this idea of having a place to own and being their own place is really appealing to them because remember, this is during the Great Depression, when nobody really was able to save up money, and everyone was just working so hard, and these men, traveling around from spot to spot to do their work is just not a very good life. You can't put roots down anywhere. And so I think this is what really appeals to George and Lenny about it. Okay, so again, Candy is still in the room and listening, and he has actually turned away from the wall to look at George and Lenny while they're talking about this place. Let's see. George sat entranced with his own picture. When Candy spoke, they both jumped as though they had been caught doing something reprehensible. Candy said, you know where there's a place like that? George was on guard immediately. Suppose I do, he said. What's that to you? You don't need to tell me where it's at. Might be any place. Sure, said George. That's right. You couldn't find it in 100 years. Candy went on excitedly. How much they want for a place like that? George watched him suspiciously. Well, I could get it for $600. The old people that owns it is flat bust, and the old lady needs an operation. Say, what's it to you? You got nothing to do with us. Candy said, I ain't much good with only one hand. I lost my hand right here on this ranch. That's why they gave me the job of swampin'. And they give me $250 because I lost my hand. And I got 50 more saved up right in the bank right now. That's 300. And I got 50 more coming the end of the month. Tell you what, he leaned forward eagerly. Suppose I went in with you guys. That's 350 bucks I'd put in. I ain't much good, but I could cook and tend the chickens and hoe the garden some. How'd that be? George half closed his eyes. I gotta think about that. We was always gonna do it by ourselves. Candy interrupted him. I'd make a will and leave my share to you guys in case I kick off, 'cause I ain't got no relatives nor nothing. You guys got any money? Maybe we could do it right now. George spat on the floor disgustedly. He got $10 between us. Then he said thoughtfully, look, if me and Lenny work a month and don't spend nothing, we'll have $100. That'd be $450. I bet we could swing her for that. Then you and Lenny could go get her started, and I'd get a job and make up the rest, and you can sell eggs and stuff like that. They fell silent. They fell into a silence. They looked at one another amazed. This thing that they had never really believed in was coming true. George said reverently, Geez, I bet we could swing her. His eyes were full of wonder. I bet we could swing her, he repeated softly. Candy sat on the edge of his bunk. He scratched the stump of his wrist nervously. I got hurt 4 years ago, he said. They'll can me pretty soon. Just as soon as I can't swamp out no bunkhouses, they'll put me on the county. Maybe if I give you guys my money, you'll let me hoe in the garden even after I ain't no good at it. And I'll wash dishes and little chicken stuff like that. But I'll be on our own place, and I'll be let to work on our own place, he said miserably. You seen what they done to my dog tonight? They says he wasn't no good to himself, nor nobody else. When they can me here, I wished somebody'd shoot me, but they won't do nothing like that. I won't have no place to go, and I can't get no more jobs. I'll have $30 more coming time you guys is ready to quit. Okay, so George and Lenny have always talked about this goal, but both of them kind of thought that it would never come true. Now, all of a sudden, it's kind of within reach because Candy has more than half the money that they would need to do it. So all of a sudden, Candy and George are both really excited because they're like, oh my gosh, like we might actually be able to do this. Candy also kind of compares himself to his old dog. He's like, I can't use both hands anymore. I'm getting old. Pretty soon they'll fire me and I won't have anywhere else to go. But if I go in on this house with you guys, I'll always have a home. I'll leave it to you in my will. Okay, so all this stuff is kind of like making sense, actually. George stood up. We'll do her, he said. We'll fix up that little old place and we'll go live there. He sat down again. They all sat still, all bemused by the beauty of the thing. Each mind was popped into the future when this lovely thing should come about. George said wonderingly, suppose there was a carnival or a circus come to town, or a ball game or any damn thing. Old Candy nodded in appreciation of the idea. We'd just go to her, George said. We wouldn't ask nobody if we could, just say, we'll go to her, and we would. Just milk the cow and sling some grain to the chickens and go to her. And put some grass to the rabbits, Lenny broke in. I would never forget to feed them. When are we going to do it, George? In 1 month. Right squack in 1 month. Know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write to them old people that owns the place that we'll take it. And Candy will send $100 to bind her. Sure will, said Candy. They got a good stove there? Sure, got a nice stove. Burns coal or wood. I'm going to take my pup, said Lenny. I bet by Christ he likes it there, by Jesus. Okay, so remember I told you that Lenny presses when he's excited. So he's like saying all of these like somewhat bad words because he's so excited. Okay, so voices were approaching from outside. George said quickly, don't tell nobody about it, just us three and nobody else. They liable to can us, so we can't make no stake. Just go on like we was gonna buck barley the rest of our lives, and then all of a sudden, someday we'll go get our pay and scram out of here. Lenny and Candy nodded, and they were grinning with delight. Don't tell nobody, Lenny said to himself. Candy said, George, huh? I oughta have shot that dog myself, George. I shouldn't have oughta let no stranger shoot my dog. The door opened. Slim came in. Okay, hold on. I want to go back to this line that Candy just said, where he said, I should have shot the dog myself. I shouldn't have let no stranger shoot my dog. Okay, he feels like because he's the one who loves the dog and the dog trusts, that he should have been there with his dog in like those final moments, and he should have been the one to put him out of his misery. Just remember that quote. It might become important later. Okay, also they have a plan to not tell anyone else about what they're thinking of doing, and this is because some of the men might get jealous and tell the boss, and then maybe the boss will fire them so that they can't accomplish it. Okay, so, or the other thing that could happen is that more people might try to come in on this idea, and they don't really want that. The door opened. Slim came in, followed by Curly and Carlson and Whit. Slim's hands were black with tar and he was scowling. Curly hung close to his elbow. Curly said, well, I didn't mean nothing, Slim. I just asked you. Slim said, well, you've been asking me too often. I'm getting damn sick of it. If you can't look after your own damn wife, what you expect me to do about it? You lay off of me. I'm just trying to tell you I didn't mean nothing, said Curly. I just thought you might have saw her. Why didn't you tell her to stay the hell home where she belongs, said Carlson. You let her hang around the bunkhouses, and pretty soon you're gonna have something pinned on your hands, and you won't be able to do nothing about it. Curly whirled on Carlson. You keep out of this, lest you want to step outside. Carlson laughed. You damn punk, he said. You tried to throw a scare into Slim, and you couldn't make it stick. Slim throwed a scare into you. You're a yella as a frog belly. I don't care if you're the best welter in the country. You come for me and I'll kick your damn head off. Okay, so Curly tried to pick a fight with Slim, but Slim was not having it because Slim is not afraid of Curly. And so Curly then turns on to Carlson and is like, well, what about you? You want to fight? And Carlson's like, whatever. Like, I will kick your butt for sure. Candy joined the attack with joy. Glove full of Vaseline, he said disgustedly. Curly glared at him. His eyes slipped on past and lighted on Lenny, and Lenny was still smiling with delight at the memory of the ranch. Okay, so Curly can't find anyone in the room who's afraid of him or intimidated about him. And so he's looking around the room and he happens to look at Lenny. Lenny is still smiling about the rabbits, but Curly doesn't know that. All Curly sees is that Lenny is laughing and smiling when people are putting Curly down. Like they just said, oh, blood full of Vaseline, right? And so Lenny is laughing. And Curly automatically assumes that Lenny's laughing at him, when really Lenny is just happy about this idea of the rabbits. Curly stepped over to Lenny like a terrier. What the hell are you laughing at? Lenny looked blankly at him. Huh? Then Curly's rage exploded. Come on, you big guy, get up on your feet. No big son of a guy is gonna laugh at me. I'll show you who's yella. Lenny looked helplessly at George, and then he got up and tried to retreat. Curly was balanced and poised. He slashed at Lenny with his left and then smashed down his nose with a right. Lenny gave a cry of terror. Blood welled from his nose. George, he cried, make him let me alone, George. He backed until he was against the wall, and Curly followed, slugging him in the face. Lenny's hands remained at his sides. He was too frightened to defend himself. George was on his feet, yelling, get him, Lenny, don't let him do it. Okay, so all this time, George has been telling him if there's a fight, stay away from it. Curly goes over and picks a fight with Lenny, punches him in the nose, probably broke his nose. He's got blood coming out of his nose. And instead of George encouraging him to get away or like asking the other men to help get Curly off of Lenny, George says, get him, Lenny. Don't let him do that to you, because George knows that Lenny is strong enough to completely annihilate this guy. But normally he should be telling Lenny not to fight. I think he's just like caught up in the moment. And so he says, get him, Lenny. Lenny covered his face with huge paws and bleated with terror. He cried, make him stop, George. Then Curly attacked his stomach and cut off his wind. Slim jumped up. The dirty little rat, he cried. I'll get him myself. George put out his hand and grabbed Slim. Wait a minute, he shouted. He cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled, get him, Lenny. Lenny took his hands away from his face and looked about for George, and Curly slashed at his eyes. The big face was covered with blood. George yelled again, I said, get him. Curly's fist was swinging when Lenny reached for it. The next minute, Curly was flopping like a fish on a line, and his closed fist was lost in Lenny's big hand. George ran down the room. Let go of him, Lenny, let go. Okay, so Lenny doesn't choose to punch Curly. Instead, when Curly's like going in to punch Lenny, then Lenny just reaches out and just like cups Curly's whole fist inside of his hand. But if we remember what happened in Weed with the dress that he wouldn't let go of, we know that when Lenny gets scared, Lenny just holds on tighter and tighter, and we know how strong he is. So this is not going to be good. And immediately George realizes he's made a mistake in telling Lenny to go after him. So immediately he's running over there saying, oh, no, 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 let him go. Let his hand go. Let his hand go. But Lenny watched in terror the flopping little man whom he held. Blood ran down Lenny's face. One of his eyes was cut and closed. George slapped him in the face again and again, and still Lenny held on to the closed fist. Curly was white and shrunken by now, and his struggling had become weak. He stood crying, his fist lost in Lenny's paw. George shouted over and over, let go his hand, Lenny, let go. Slim, come help me while the guy got any hand left. Suddenly, Lenny let go of his hold. He crouched, cowering against the wall. You told me to, George, he said miserably. Curly sat down at the floor, looking in wonder at his crushed hand. Slim and Carlson bent over him. Then Slim straightened up and regarded Lenny with horror. We gotta get him to a doctor, he said. Looks to me like every bone in his hand is bust. I didn't wanna, Lenny cried. I didn't want to hurt him. Slim said, Carlson, you get the candy wagon hitched up. We'll take him into Soledad and get him fixed up. Carlson hurried out. Slim turned to the whimpering Lenny. It ain't your fault, he said. This punk sure had it coming to him. But geez, he ain't hardly got no hand left. Slim hurried out and in a moment returned with a tin cup of water. He held it to Curly's lips. George said, Slim, will we get canned now? We need the steak. Will Curly's old man can us now? Slim smiled wryly. He knelt down beside Curly. You got your senses in hand enough to listen, he said. Curly nodded. Well then, listen, Slim went on. I think you got your hand caught in a machine. If you don't tell nobody what happened, we ain't going to. But you just tell and try to get this guy canned and we'll tell everybody. And then will you get the laugh? I won't tell, said Curly. He avoided looking at Lenny. Okay, so Slim is really smart and does know how to solve problems. And he tells Curly, we won't tell anyone if you don't. But if you do tell on Lenny and try to get him and George fired, we're going to tell it all over the county how you got your hand crushed. And everyone will be laughing at you. Curly, because he cares so much about his image, he says, no, I won't tell anybody. Buggy wheels sounded outside. Slim helped Curly up. Come on now. Carlson's going to take you to a doctor. He helped Curly out the door. The sound of wheels drew away. In a moment, Slim came back into the bunkhouse. He looked at Lenny, still crouched fearfully against the wall. Let's see your hands, he asked. Lenny stuck out his hands. Christ almighty, I hate to have you mad at me, Slim said. George broke in. Lenny was just scared, he explained. He didn't know what to do. I told you nobody ought never to fight him. No, I guess it was Candy, I told. Candy nodded solemnly. That's just what you done, he said, right this morning when Curly first slid into your friend. You says he better not fool with Lenny if he knows what's good for him. That's just what you says to me. George turned to Lenny. It ain't your fault, he said. You don't need to be scared no more. You done just what I told you to. Maybe you better go in the washroom and clean up your face. You look like hell. Lenny smiled with his bruised mouth. I didn't want no trouble, he said. He walked toward the door, but just before he came to it, he turned back. George, what you want? I can still tend the rabbits, George? Sure, you ain't done nothing wrong. I didn't mean no harm, George. Well, get the hell out and wash your face. And that's the end of chapter 3. Okay, so we could be heading into trouble. Maybe Curly will not keep his word. Maybe the dad will figure it out on their own, like on his own. We know that Candy, Lenny, and George are planning to just to get a little bit of money together, and they're going to go and buy that house. But if they get fired, that plan is not going to work out. So this is kind of like a big event in the book. I hope that me reading it to you guys helped you a little bit. And so I know you'll be able to get your homework done. And I will see you guys soon.